Hey everybody, I'm really glad that you're here. In this video, I'm going to talk about a technology that I think has a lot of potential for learning and teaching. Virtual reality. Here you can see I have a couple of headsets. I have the Oculus Quest 2 and I have an HP Reverb G2. Now, they're a little bit different in terms of what they do, but in this video, I'm going to talk about 5 different ways that we can use virtual reality in education. And I'm also going to show you a bonus tip at the end of the video on how we can actually create content within these virtual worlds. Let's take a look at each of these devices first, and then we'll start looking at the 5 tips and the bonus tip for this video. Now, the first device is the Oculus Quest 2. This is a fantastic device which is a standalone device. It doesn't need to connect up to a computer in order to work. You can actually connect it up to the internet, download content directly to the device, and it can act independently from a computer. And then I have the HP Reverb G2. This device connects to your computer and then runs through your computer in order to create that mixed reality and that virtual reality environment. Now, both of them are great, but for this video, I'm going to concentrate a little bit more on the Oculus Quest 2, and a lot of the videos and the screenshots that I show you will be from the Oculus environment. But be aware that the same type of content exists for both types of headsets. Now, basically the way these devices work is that we put them on our head, we have stereoscopic viewports that gives us a 360-degree or a very immersive three-dimensional experience. And it is quite a stunning experience. I'm limited. Here on YouTube, I can just give you this flat experience, but I'll show you as best I can exactly how these would work within an educational environment. And then we can interact with that environment by using a couple of controllers, and this allows us to do things like point and click and move around that environment. So we not only have sensors on the headset itself, which allows me to know where I'm looking in space, but we also have hands that we can bring into that environment, or whatever the case may be. When we look at any type of educational transfer, we can look at static or passive type of experiences, and then we can look at a more active or immersive type of experience. So a passive experience would be, for example, this YouTube video. It is somewhat passive. I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm not asking you to interact with it. If I wanted to create interaction, I could say something like hit the like button, subscribe, and share with colleagues. That would be interactive, and a good interaction at that. But for the most part, it's a pretty passive experience. Now, when it comes to a virtual environment, we can absorb information, we can participate and take things in passively, look around, but even the act of looking around creates an immersive experience which creates activity. So even though I might be, say, watching a video or something within the virtual environment, the fact that I can move my head around and explore that environment actually creates a more immersive and a active type of participation. So let's have a look at 5 ways that I believe virtual reality will be useful in education and learning. First, we have documentaries. Now, we've all seen documentaries in the classroom before. It's a great way to start a conversation about science or a social issue. We have the students watch a documentary, and then after watching that documentary, they are able to discuss it in groups, or we're able to give them an assignment on it. In some way, we're able to interact with what we've just seen. Well, the virtual world goes way beyond that. We're in an immersive documentary, and there are many, many different subject areas that are available already in things like the Oculus Store. For example, there are documentaries on science, there's documentaries on social issues, there's documentaries on nature. There's a huge library that's already starting to be developed that we're going to be able to take advantage of. And those documentaries actually create that immersive participatory experience before we discuss it in a group or before we write a paper on it. So for example, let's say I'm watching a nature documentary on elephants. It's one thing to see a screen with some shots of an elephant. It's another thing to be in that immersive documentary where the elephants are walking around me. You get the sense that you're actually there with those elephants. And I've seen a number of documentaries on social issues. For example, I saw a documentary on famine in Somalia, and it was absolutely chilling how emotionally powerful it was to be sitting in a medical clinic with children that were starving. It was horrible. And it really had an impact on me individually because I felt more immersed in that environment. And that's something that we can share with the students as well. They can experience it more immersively so that they come out of it not just with a structured knowledge of something that exists, but with an emotional knowledge as well. So documentaries are a great feature, and there are tons and tons available on the Oculus and on other VR platforms. An example of how virtual reality in the classroom can be used to help create an awareness of real-world social issues, we can look at something like marine habitat. Students could use their headset to have an immersive experience where they're in the marine environment, where they're looking at marine mammals, where they're looking at that ecosystem. And then they could ask themselves the question, what's happening in the real world to those environments? Well, in the case of the marine environment, it's being polluted. There is a lot of garbage being dumped into the oceans and riverways leading to those oceans, and organizations like Team Seas are seeking to remove trash from those environments. Team Seas is on a mission to raise $30 million in order to remove 30 million pounds of trash. Maybe this is an opportunity for students to do fundraising to participate in that solution to the real-world problem of garbage and trash in the oceans and the riverways. Visit teamseas.org, check out what's happening there, and look at some of the work that they're doing to try to protect those environments in the real world. Even though we enjoy them in the virtual world, we have to deal with them in the real world, so it's a great way for us to make that connection between the two. Now, the second way that we can use virtual reality in the classroom is by traveling the world. We can go and take tours of different cities that are available on the Oculus. We can go and we can watch natural places of the world such as Iceland or Greenland, or visit Antarctica, visit the South Pole. In fact, within one 10-minute period, I went to the North Pole and I went to the South Pole all through the VR headset. It was fascinating. Now, there is also interactive travel. So as an example, we have Google Maps or Street View, where we can go in and see a 360 version of Street View, and we can choose any location on Earth and then travel to that location. I shouldn't say any location. It will be limited to what Google's actually filmed at this point, but there are thousands and thousands of possibilities of where we can travel to. Imagine this in a classroom where you're discussing some country somewhere in the world. You can actually have students visit the streets of that country, to look around them, to see what's around them at that point in time. It's a fascinating thing, and it's a very powerful way to travel the world without having to actually travel the world. Now, I would also say it's better to travel the world, but this is a great way to begin that experience. Now, a third way to introduce virtual reality in the classroom is through art and creativity. There are many artists and creative professionals that are creating unique content for the virtual three-dimensional worlds. We're able to go in, we're able to travel through their art pieces, whether it's a traditional artist through an exhibit, or whether it's an artist that's doing something new in the virtual space. It can really open up students' creativity and give them a sense of the world of art and experiencing that art in a very visceral way. A fourth way to use virtual reality in the classroom is through events and people, the social aspect. We're able to participate and interact with others in a social environment. Now, in a classroom environment, we could invite somebody into our classroom in a virtual sense, so we can have a virtual space where we collaborate. Now, this is often referred to as the metaverse, or an area where we can go in. A good example of that might be Horizon's platform or the Facebook metaverse. These are all places that we can go and interact with others. Now, we can of course have personal social interactions in the metaverse, but we can also have more structured events that occur. So for example, a lecture or a conference or a symposiums where we can go and participate and have other people speaking to us through a virtual avatar, but still in a meaningful way where we are actually engaged with them, even though we may be geographically separate. And we're not just engaged with them, for example, in a Teams meeting or a Zoom call. We're engaged with them in that interactive, immersive environment that creates more of a sense of connection. A fifth way that we can use virtual reality in the classroom is fitness and well-being. Now, one of the things that we know is that the connection between mind and body is very, very strong. So actually working with things like fitness activities or body movement or meditation or mindfulness can really help students in all aspects of their studies and all aspects of their life. And there are some really good fitness apps and some really good meditation apps that are available on the virtual reality devices that we have today, which can help students experience that without having to go to a class, without having to travel outside of that environment. They are able to go in and experience what some of these activities might look like and actually get meaningful results from them. Being in an immersive environment where they can just relax, or being in an environment where they can move their bodies, is going to be something that helps them with all of their studies. Now, what about creating for the virtual environment? There's really two different types of creation that I see within virtual reality right now. The one is where I go into the virtual environment and I use tools within that environment to create something. A good example of an in-console development tool set would be something like the Horizons platform, where we can go in and we can create our own virtual world and then invite other participants to come and experience it. That's all done within the virtual reality console. And if I want to bring the real world into the virtual world, then I'm going to need some sort of device to capture 360 video. This here is a little GoPro Max, and the GoPro Max has two wide-angle lenses, one on each side of the device, that captures a 360 image as it occurs. This can be very useful because it involves less post-production. I don't have to stitch together a whole bunch of camera images. I don't have to have a whole bunch of cameras. And this is one of the 360 cameras that's available today. This is quite a good one. I like the GoPro Max. And what we can do is we can create, say, a hike, and then we can share that with other people so that they can also participate on that adventure with us. So we can create inside the virtual reality headset by creating virtual world, or we can take 360 cameras and we can bring the real world into a virtual space where we can then augment it and interact with it in new ways. So in this video, you have seen how we can use virtual reality as part of a learning and teaching journey, and I hope it's something that you consider exploring. The price of these headsets has come down dramatically. I'm also very interested in augmented reality, which would involve something like a HoloLens. That's a device that I have to wait until the price drops a little bit before I'll bring it into my own teaching. But for now, these are very inexpensive devices that can add a lot, well, not very inexpensive, but they're somewhat inexpensive devices. Maybe for a school, could buy a couple of the Oculus devices and then share them around the classroom, and you can design lesson plans where students interact in the virtual world, come out of that virtual world and interact in the real world, so that there's a bit of a back and forth there. They're very powerful devices. They have a lot of potential, and that potential is starting to be realized today. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and share this with other colleagues that might be interested.